Welcome to the session on MS21, Social Processes and Behavioral Issues. We are discussing about organizational culture, and today in this session we are going to discuss in terms of three important aspects. One is about how to assess the organizational culture. Second, how to change an organizational culture. And third, how to challenge, develop a very positive and cohesive culture in an organizational setup. Number one, when we discuss about assessing the organizational culture, there are several organizational scientists. They argue for assessing the organizational culture with different quantitative methods, while some of the organizational theorists, they prescribe for assessing the organizational culture in different qualitative methods. The quantitative methods, when I'm referring to, they are in terms of questionnaires. They are valuable because putting up a questionnaire format, they provide some statistical significance in terms of precision, in terms of comparing one participant to that other, and in terms of objectivity. Whereas in qualitative methods, the processes adopted are in the form of interviews and observations, because they stand to be more valuable in the way it is because of that it gives a more detailed, descriptive, and a uniqueness. Some of the widely used assessment tools are, one is an organizational culture inventory. Okay, there are other tools like Kilman-Saxton culture gap survey, but the organizational culture inventory, which is in the short form called as an OCI, this focuses on behavior that helps an employee fit into an organization and meet the expectation of its co-workers. This tool uses Maslow's motivational need of hierarchy theory as its basis, and it tries to measure some 12 different cultural styles. A couple of the underlying dimensions of this OCI are task, people, security, or satisfaction. There are 4 satisfaction cultural styles and 8 security cultural styles, and this particular instrument is self-report based. Around 120 questions are there, and this questionnaire provides an individual assessment of culture, and it may be aggregated to the work group and to the organizational level. The second instrument is the Kilman-Saxton culture gap survey. It focuses on what actually happens, okay, and on the expectations of the others in the organization. There are 2 underlying dimensions in this particular survey. One is about the technical, and the other one is the human and the time, and the measure in terms of the short term versus the long term. With these 2 dimensions, the actual operating norms and also the ideal norms are assessed, and they are assessed in some 4 different areas. The areas are in form of the task support, in the short-term technical norms, task innovations like long-term technical norms, social relationships, that's about the short-term human orientation norms, personal freedom also they assess, long-term human orientation norms. This is also a self-report question, as like the organizational culture inventory. And this gap survey provides an individual assessment of culture, and this also may be aggregated to the work group, and this is used in firms throughout in different developed countries, in the US, and so also in the US also they are primarily being used by many non-profit organizations. I think in one of the earlier class, I spoke about another instrument that is used in assessing the organizational culture, That's called as an octapace, OCTAPACE. This is developed by our own Indian HRD guru, Uday Parikh. It is a 40-item instrument, and octapace is widely being used in country like India. It measures the ethos of an organization. It gives the profile of an organizational ethos in 8 values, and these values are lying in OCTAPACE. That means openness, confrontation, trust, authenticity, proaction, autonomy, collaboration, and experiment. The instrument, if you'll see, which is also available in many public domains, you may find that the instrument contains 2 parts. One of the part talks about the values as stated in first item, say item 1 to 24, each having some 8 values, and the respondent need to check in a Likert scale, which is a 4-point. And second, it contains some 16 statements on beliefs and 2 each over there for 8 values, and the respondents are required again to check in terms of a Likert type scale, which is a 4-point scale. And this is how it is widely being used and shared in Indian organizations. Okay. The third one, there is another way of assessing the organization culture, that's called as triangulation. It's a study that was being carried out by a rehabilitation center in a 400-bed hospital. They've incorporated triangulation. What do you mean by triangulation? First of all, when I'm talking about this method as a part of assessment of organizational culture, triangulation talks about the use of many multiple methods to measure the organization culture with an objective to improvise the inclusiveness and the accuracy for measuring the organizational culture. Triangulation has also been used by many domain experts like anthropologists, sociologists, our own organizational behavior people also using. Its name comes from the navigational technique of using different reference or say multiple references points to locate an object. Okay, in the rehabilitation study, there are some of the methods, primarily 3 methods to triangulate, like obtrusive observation by 8 trained observers, which provides as something as an outsider perspective. Something they use called as a self-administered questionnaire that provides a quantitative information, and similarly they imbibe the personal interviews with the staffs of the people. And the study of this kind has showed that the 3 methods, they have made a very unique contribution towards the discovery of the rehabilitation center's culture itself. So this is about the triangulation all about. Well, now after assessing the organizational culture, we need to understand in terms of how to change the organizational culture, because there is a rapid environmental changes are taking place, such as globalization, diversity in our workforce, the innovation, the technological innovation, the fundamental assumptions and basic values that drive the organizations that may need to be altered. Changing an organization culture is feasible, but it is also been very difficult. Now the question is, why there is so much of difficulty? One of the reasons for the difficulty is because of, if you recall the first session on organizational culture itself, I spoke about assumptions that the people carry. Because the meaning of assumption is the deepest value, deepest level of culture that they ingrain in them, which is very unconscious in nature. As such, they are often non-controllable and non-debatable. If we see another reason for the difficulty, it is that the culture is ingrained and behavioral norms and rewards are well learned. So in a sense, employees need to unlearn the old norms before they are thinking of learning the new ones. Therefore, managers who want to change the culture should look first to the ways the culture actually is maintained. A model for cultural change actually, you know, that is that you can find out in terms of the interventions for changing an organizational culture, okay, talks about the numbers that represent what action managers can take. There are actually two basic approaches to change the existing culture. Number one, need to help the current members to buy into a new set of values. Or point two is about adding the new concern and socializing them into the organization and removing current members as appropriate. So the first action is to change the behavior in the organization. Even if the behavior does change, however, the change is not sufficient for cultural change to occur. Therefore, learners, behavior actually is the level one, the artifact of a culture. It is like individuals may change their behavior, but they may not change the values that drive it. They may rationalize something. They say, I'm only doing this because my boss is insisting me to do. Therefore, over there, manager need to take the next action, which is examining the justification for the changed behavior. It means, are employees buying into those new sets of values, or they're just merely complying that? The third action is called as a communication, and this is called as a culture communication. Okay, and this has been extremely important. All of the artifacts, I think artifacts we were referring in terms of the personal enactments, or the rites and ceremonies, or the rituals, symbols, or the stories. They send a consistent message about the new values and beliefs. It is therefore, it is very crucial that the communication that we use need to be credible. That means, what it mean? That means manager must live the new values, and they are not just to talk about it, but rather they need to live with it. Leaders need to pay attention also to the social networks, that's the informal social networks, more, so that the structural position in leading the organizational change they can see. These informal network channel or communication that I'm referring to, that combines with the employees' values and belief that managers are highly committed to the change effort, can only go a long way in making the change process a success. Okay, if you see the diagram itself, you may find there are only another two things remaining. Okay, actions, okay, 4 and 5, that involve shaping the workforce to fit it to the intended, what you want, to the intended culture. First, the organization can revise its selection process to more accurately reflect the new culture. Second, the organization can identify the individual who are resisting the culture change, who are no longer feeling comfortable with the values in the organization. So reshaping the workforce should not only involve a ruthless pursuit of non-conforming employees, it should be a gradual and a subtle change that takes actually a considerable time. Therefore, changing personnel in the organization is a very lengthy process. It cannot be done effectively in a short period of time without considerable problems. Therefore, evaluating the success of cultural change may be best done actually by looking at the behavior itself. Cultural change can be assumed to be successful if the behavior gets intrinsically motivated, okay, like an automatic pilot. If the new behavior, if you want to make it to persist, even if rewards were not present, and if the employees have internalized the new value system, then you can count that the behavior is actually been probably intrinsically motivated. If employees automatically respond to a crisis in ways that is consistent with the corporate culture, then the cultural change efforts can be deemed successful. Therefore, given the current business environment, managers actually they need to focus on on specific cultural modification, and basically there are three particular cultural modification they may think about it. Number one, support for a global view of a business. Number two, reinforce what is the expected ethical behavior. Number three, empowerment of employees to excel in product and service quality. Last part of this culture is talking about what are the challenges to develop a positive and a cohesive culture. Developing an organization culture actually is very challenging in its own right, but certain factors actually pose additional challenges to manage. Actually, it's pursuit of creating a very positive and cohesive culture. Okay, there are several things. What are the challenges? One of the criteria talks about merger and acquisition. It's like one particular situation that requires cultural change is actually a merger or an acquisition. In spite of placing a very good faith and efforts, combining the culture is very difficult, right? So therefore, alteration in culture, basically it is required where an organization employs people from different countries. Research also indicates that some organization culture actually enhances differences in national culture. For example, say, one of the study compared the foreign employees working in a multinational organization with employees working in different organizations within their own countries. The assumption over there was that employees from various countries working for the same multinational organization would be more similar than employees working in diverse organizations in their native countries. Therefore, the results were surprising. It is because there were significantly greater difference among the employees of the multinationals than among the managers working for different countries with their different companies with their native countries itself. Okay, so ultimately what I'm trying to say over here in merger and acquisition is when diversity is very high, employees are more likely to develop a shared identity in the organization culture instead of relying on their own national culture. Number two, we need to develop a global organizational culture. This is what the value that drive the organization culture and that need to support a global view of the company and its efforts. So management should embody the shared value and reward the employee who are supporting the global view. Finally, the values also need to be consistent over time. Consistent values actually that gives an organization a very unifying theme that competitors may be unable to emulate. It is because you see the global corporations, they suffer from the conflicting pressure actually, from centralization and decentralization. An overarching corporate culture which integrates the decentralized subsidiaries in locations around the world can be an asset in the increasingly competitive global marketplace. The third challenge to develop a positive and cohesive culture talks about creating a ethical organizational culture. The organizational culture can have a profound effect on the ethical behavior of organizational members. When a company's culture actually promotes the ethical norms, okay, you may see that individuals may also start behave accordingly. Managers need to encourage ethical behavior. How? It is through being a role model for the people. They can institute the philosophy that ethical behaviors actually make good business sense. And because of such efforts, it will put the company in congruence with the larger value system of the society. So managers over here can also communicate that rationalization for unethical behavior are not being tolerated. So this is about developing an ethical organizational culture. Another aspect, learners, of developing an ethical organizational culture links to a factor called as trust, because trust is also a very important key to manage ethical behavior. Okay, employees need to trust each other. Okay, employees must trust that whoever actually bells the cat, like whistleblower who does the whistleblowing, they will be protected. The procedures used to investigate the ethical problems will be fair, and that management need to take actions. Okay, so that is in terms of an ethical organization culture. And many companies will see, many of the company, they have implemented a code of ethics to help their people to discern right from the wrong. But the impact of these codes is not always positive as might be expected. For example, in our country itself, the company like Tata, the Tata Code of Conduct, if you visit, it enunciates the values that govern the conduct and activities of the companies, what the company Tata company used to do. Wipro Limited and Infosys, if you will see, they also used to have their own code of conduct and ethics. The implementation of formal ethics, guidelines is expected also when it is institutionalized, it is expected to improve the ethical behavior. Okay, and these happens to be some of the main reason in some cases to see that the code of ethics actually plays as simply a management showpiece. Sometimes that leads to cynicism and resentment. Okay, so friends, actually, we need to develop a culture of empowerment and quality. That is what is expected. Okay, because any successful organization in 21st century that promotes a culture, the culture of empowerment, the culture of empowering its people, they actually excel in product and service quality, because empowerment serves the employees to unleash their own creativity, and because that will influence the productivity. And empowerment requires also another thing, that is about eliminating the traditional bureaucratic and hierarchical structure, the notion of power. Culture that emphasizes empowerment and quality are actually being preferred by employees. Companies that value empowerment and continuous improvement, actually they promote the high product and service quality. In India, for example, like a hotel like Marriott, they have all the employees, they are called as associates. The company's employee policy actually rests something on 3 mantras. They believe on an open door policy, they believe on empowerment, they believe on fairness. It's like the door of the boss's room is always been open, they say. Every hotel has an integrity hotline that allows employees in Marriott Group to call anonymously with grievances. And their vice president says they have worked very hard at creating a culture where there is a level of confidence that the voice of the employees are heard. The full honors, involving your employees in decision making removes the obstacles Okay, removes the obstacles, and communicating the value of the product and service quality basically reinforces the value of empowerment and quality in the organizational culture. Therefore, in this class, we spoke in terms of the different methods to assess, say both the qualitative and quantitative method need to be assessed for organizational culture. The organizational culture inventory we discussed, OCI, Kilman-Sexton cultural gap survey. These are some of the quantitative tools, and with the hope that they generate more accurate assessment of organizational culture, managers may combine these multiple instruments with a practice that's called as a triangulation. That's also we discussed. We spoke about the action that managers can take to change the organizational culture. Manager can use two approaches to change organizational culture. They can help the current members to get into the new set of values, or add the new members and socialize them into the organization, and remove the current members appropriately. So managers over here must send consistent message actually to their people about the new values and beliefs, provide a credible communication, and they need to live up with the new values. That's also I impressed on. Finally, we spoke about identifying the challenges the organization face to develop a positive and cohesive culture. Because positive and cohesive corporate culture may be difficult, specifically at the time of mergers, acquisition, and globalization, because there is a possibility of conflict between organizational and cultural diversity on a geographical level. So therefore, developing an ethical culture requires the management to go for modeling, promote the ethical norms, promote the trust among its people. So developing a culture of empowerment and quality involves including your employees or involving your people in the decision-making process, removing the obstacle to their performances, and reinforce the value of product and services. Thank you so much, friends.